In this video, we will talk about the question, can you train martial arts on your own? So to answer the question quite simply, of course you can train alone. The way I see it, if you want to be really good at anything, it's not so much a question of can you train alone, rather than the statement that you must train alone. If you do the math, even if you're training at a regular facility, say 2 to 3 times a week, the ratio of time to when you're in those classes to when you're out of the classes is still incredibly unbalanced, and that's time that you could be using to get even better.
The only thing that I see that is distinctly different about me is I'm not afraid to die on a treadmill.
You would not be outworked.
I will not be outworked, period.
Now I'm sure the words overtraining are running in some people's mind when they hear me say that. Let me state that I'm absolutely not being facetious with that statement at all. This is what the really elite people are doing. The real skill development has to take place upon your own watch, and knowing that you're doing more than your competition will give you massive confidence in your abilities.
I liked to be a little bit overtrained. Yes, you were tired. Yes, I had to come back for the second workout at night, but so what?
So firstly, I'll be talking about the importance of training alone and putting those hours into your craft. And in the second part of the video, I'll be taking you through some methods and means of which you can do that and keep it fresh and interesting for yourself. I also just want to clarify that I'm by no means saying that training alone is superior to training with an experienced instructor, for instance, or a training partner. However, what I have observed is that a person's self-belief and drive to get better is without a doubt the biggest determining factor that separates the elite from the mediocre. I 100% believe that you can learn a hell of a lot more than you probably think you can just by watching people who are successful and then putting into practice what you see them do in your own training. A lot of entrepreneurs and high performers also subscribe to this notion that the willingness to be self-sufficient and to put in the time to get better far outweighs any formal qualifications or training you do on the subject. Now, it would be quite foolish to think it's going to happen overnight, but by maximising the effort that you put in and using your time wisely, you're going to be able to accelerate the process for yourself quite considerably. And in my experience, that comes down to basically 2 areas. Number 1 is doing the right things, and number 2 is doing them with enough intensity when you train. You can see that with any elite athletes, for instance. Take this story about Jose Rodriguez, who's a football player who just signed with Real Madrid, and he tells this story about when he goes to training for the first time. I remember the first time when I went to Real Madrid's training. I got there 2 hours earlier to impress my coach, but when I got there, I saw Cristiano was already there training. So it's not so much a question of what do you have to do, rather who do you have to become to be able to achieve the things you want to achieve. It might help you to look at some people you admire, for instance, or people who you respect. So let's take Ronaldo again, for instance. If you ask the question, what kind of person is Ronaldo? What must his mindset be like to become arguably the best football player in the world?
For me, I think the small details in the hands gonna make a huge difference. You have to work. I try to do it almost every day. This is why I'm in a top level many years. It's not by coincidence. It's because I do it extra outside the pitch.
I really believe in having a strong work ethic and having the discipline to show up to training even when you don't want to, because you have a goal that's greater than your emotions in that moment. So whether your training partner can come to training or not, or whether he flakes on you, can't be an excuse that you didn't get that 1% better than you were yesterday. So now we're going to go to some footage of me training, and I'm going to give you a few methods that you can use to maximise your efficiency when training alone. One thing I almost always warm up with is some form of shadow boxing. This is great to do on its own, but what really helps is to perform in front of a mirror if you've got one available. You'll be able to check that your technique is how you think it is, and if you're making any mistakes as well. Obviously watch out for things like making sure your punches go out and come back up on the same line, your feet and shoulders are in the right position, your hands are raised and things like that. Shadow boxing is really effective because you don't have something to hit, so you're using things like your abs, your back muscles much more, and that's because you have to stop the force of the punch or the kick yourself and maintain your balance as well. Performing your moves really slowly is probably one of the best ways to really develop your technique. For the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to be showing you with kicking techniques. Now, if you see here, I'm holding onto this wall, and that's so I don't have to cater for the balance, which would take my focus away from the actual kick itself. With slow kicking drills, you can do lots of different variations like holds, slow and fast repetitions, and also combining different kicks and doubling up kicks as well. This is something that I've really been getting into lately. It's the agility ladder. It's a really cheap piece of equipment, and it's amazing for your footwork, dexterity, and just overall agility. And it can also get you really fit as well, depending on the intensity level you train at. I personally feel that a lot of martial arts styles lack adequate footwork. All martial arts styles have their own benefits and different things that are good about them, but one thing I've noticed across the board is a lot of them do lack decent footwork, or the footwork that they employ is incredibly basic. So that's one of the reasons I like to train this, but it's also great fun as well. Sometimes I use the ladder as a warm-up exercise, as it's perfect for getting your body nice and loose and warm and getting a sweat on, but you can also incorporate it as a regular part of your training if you want to go more intense or do longer rounds. I absolutely love training on a heavy bag, and it probably makes up the majority of my alone training actually. It's important though to make sure that you variate what you're doing a little bit so that you don't stagnate and get bored, because then you'll lose interest quite quickly. So the first thing we're going to do here is just a hands only training session, and of course you can do a kicking one as well if you like. So obviously you'll be employing your boxing techniques in here, but you can also add elbows from Thai boxing and things like that as well. So if you can see here, this is what I would call intense and fast punching. So I'm punching really quickly here. I'm not paying too much attention to power, I'm just trying to move quickly, be nice and light and stay relaxed throughout as well. And then obviously the opposite to that, you've got hard and powerful, so where you're trying to hit the bag as hard as you can in order to develop your power, not worrying too much about punch volume on this one, but just trying to deliver the maximum power that we can behind those strikes. You can also just work on one or two simple combinations, so you would just repeat them throughout your rounds, or you can simplify that even further and just repeat one technique and do it from different setups. Remember guys, that whatever you're training, whether it's power or speed, always be mindful to have good technique. The reason being is when you start to get tired especially, your technique will just naturally start to wane off, and then you'll be embedding bad habits into your muscle memory, which you really don't want. And I've also included an experimental round in here, which is something I really enjoy doing. It's just where you're experimenting with different things, not worrying too much about what you're doing, having fun with it and trying out things and seeing if they work. Remember guys, that working with a sufficient intensity level is incredibly important. The reason I say that is I often observe people who seem to train at the same pace and intensity level every time they're training, and they obviously never really seem to get any better. But the most unfortunate part is they seem to be under the illusion that they really are doing enough to get good. However, they're just simply quite unaware of what it actually takes. So just make sure that you're not falling victim to that. Obviously don't kill yourself so that you can't train the next day, but make sure you're putting in sufficient effort with whatever you're doing. This next one is something I do quite often, and that's self-videotaping my training sessions. You can do this with anything you do, whether it's heavy bag, to footwork, to shadow boxing, or whatever you want. It's a similar concept to shadow boxing, looking in the mirror at your technique, but it's superior in the fact that you can see yourself from all different angles. Sometimes you might be doing something in a certain way that feels really good, but then you watch it back and you realise that you had a big flaw in your technique. If you have a device that does it, I recommend you record in a high frame rate. And that's so that when you get it onto, say, editing software or an external player, that you can really slow it down and you've got those extra frames to check out how you're moving. This can also act as a really good motivator if you collect those clips together in an archive and then look back at your improvements over time. Now, I don't think I need to tell you how important working out and conditioning is to supplement with your regular training in whatever endeavour you're pursuing. So if you're not doing any extra work on top of your regular training of your techniques, then you're really missing out. Remember that Cristiano Ronaldo clip I showed earlier, where he said he believed he's still on top of the game because he does extra off the pitch? It's exactly the same for what we're doing. So make sure you've got a decent conditioning program, whatever that is, to supplement along with your martial arts training. Now this one is a little less practical than the others, but no less important. It's more of a mental training exercise, and that's studying in great detail somebody whose technique you admire. Now when I was a little kid, I used to do this all the time. I just was having fun with it, didn't really know what I was doing, but looking back in hindsight, it was probably one of the most important things I ever did. What I personally recommend is downloading the clips from YouTube onto your computer and then opening them in a player so you can study them. I like to use QuickTime Player when I'm studying technique because you can just pause the video and then hit the right key to shift it along frame by frame, which is really good for studying somebody. I'll sometimes go one step further with this and actually slow down the clips using editing software and then take them to the gym with me so I can learn on the go while I'm training. It's a really good way of refining your technique and also staying inspired and motivated and getting really excited watching those clips. A good way to improve your reaction times is to create an audio recording of you calling out certain numbers that correlate to specific techniques. So you're probably aware that in boxing they use numbers 1 to 6 for all the basic boxing punches. So for instance, if I was to say 6, 3, 2, that would be a rear uppercut, a lead hook and a cross. And you can further adapt that with more numbers or commands for kicks and any other techniques you want as well. The idea is to react as fast as you can when you hear those commands without thinking about it too much. It will be something like this: 1, 1, 2, 3, 6, 4, 3, 4, rear leg side kick, 8 straight punches, 1, 1, 2. So you can also do this with combos as well. So for instance, you might memorize 3 to 4 basic combinations that would correlate to a number. And when you hear that number called, you have to react with the correct set of moves as fast as you can, again, without thinking about it too much. It can be helpful to keep a log of any training you're currently doing, as well as including pointers that you feel you could improve on. This was also something that Bruce Lee believed in and was known to do quite diligently. This can help to motivate us because when we start to see results, we can read back over previous entries to see where we've improved. Some things that you can include in there are a brief description of your workout for that day, how did you feel it went, and what could you improve on next time. It can also be really helpful to include a description of your current diet and or any supplements that you're taking also. I hope you enjoyed this video and got some value from it. It was just a general overview and some ideas of things that you can do when training alone to keep it exciting and fresh for yourself, but also so that you don't stagnate and repeat the same patterns all the time when you're training. If you'd like to see any of these in more detail, just let me know and I'm sure I can do a video about that in the future for you. If you like this video and found value in it, please subscribe to the Bioneer and follow me across all social media platforms. Thank you very much for watching and I'll see you next time.